Hi and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we are going to talk about literal types. When we type annotate a variable with a very specific type, as opposed to a general type, such as the number type or the string type, it becomes a literal type. And what do I mean by that? Let's say we have a variable, it is called num, and we type annotated to something very specific. Now, if I type annotated to string, not a string, just string or number or boolean, whatever, let's type it correctly, then it is not really specific, even though it's boolean. There are two values, like true and false. But what do we want? What can we do if we want it to be very specific? And what do I mean by specific? What I mean by specific is, for example, 10 or the string of hi. For this example, let's just consider 15. Now, what does this mean? I have not provided a general type like a number type or a string type, but I've provided the literal value of 15 as the type. This is what's called a literal type in TypeScript. And the only value this variable or this num identifier can hold is 15. It is not 14, it is not 13, it is just 15. No other value can be held by this type. And this is called a literal type. Now keep in mind, even though this number, this thing looks like a number, it is not a number. It is a type because we have used it to type annotate our variable, the variable num. And if I hover on that, we can see that evidently right here. Now, this is a very basic example of a literal type. A possible use case for a literal type is that when we want a variable to return a very specific value, we don't want it to return like generalized values like any number possible or any string possible, but maybe we want our variable to return a string from a possible set of strings. And that said, for example, it's a server status. We just want to return whether it's a success or it's a failure or it's processing. So we don't want it to return anything else. We don't want it to return, I don't know, or like wait or something else, any other string. We just want it to be these three strings. How would we do that in TypeScript? Well, that's where we use literal types. So let's take a look at a more real world example of that. Now I'm going to use type aliases because they are like, we need more practice for type aliases, and they really help us bring into life these kind of examples. So I'm going to take our example, the server status. Seeing that this is a type alias, we need to make sure that it is Pascal case. So server status. Now I want the server status to be one of these strings. I want it to be a subset of the set that I'm about to create. So it's either going to be success. I hope I'm typing that correctly. It could be failure, or just for fun, we could say it is processing. Now it could be one of these three types. And if I hover on the server status, we can see those three types. Now keep in mind, success, failure, and processing, they're not strings, they're types. They look like strings, but they're types. So let's take a look at our first response. I am going to type annotated to server status. Now here I cannot say, hi, how are you? I can't do that. You might think you could, but you can't, because you can only select one of these three. Now this is a really, really good and type safe way of creating variables for which you have a specific range of values in mind. Now this could be success, and it has to be spelled correctly, otherwise it's not going to work. it could be failure, or it could be processing. And let's change the variable names to 1, 2, and 3. So in our first example, res1, it is success, then it is failure, and then it is processing. And since we're using a union type, we know that it could be success or failure or processing. If we would use an intersection type, then we wouldn't have been able to do this. All right, so that is it for literal types for now. See you in the next video.